Hello, and welcome to Talk of the Town. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your guest host tonight, Belinda Brewster, and I'm on the Board of Selectmen here in Plymouth. And I have three terrific guests with me tonight, and we're going to be talking about all things financial in Plymouth. First, I'd like to introduce Selectman Matt Muratori, who is chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and I am very proud to serve with him. And then I'd like to introduce John Moody, who is chairman of the Advisory and Finance Committee. And then lastly, but by no means leastly, is Mr. Mark Garrett, who is on the Planning Board, past chairman of the Planning Board, and chairman of the Industrial Land Use Committee. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being with me this evening.
Great to be here again.
Yeah,
it's my third time this month.
Well, you're definitely a pro. I think it's been a year since I've been here, and this is my very first time hosting, so please bear with me.
We'll have fun then.
Yeah, we will have fun. Just be nice. I'd like to start with, because I'm not sure everyone kind of understands the unique roles that we have in Plymouth. I think people understand the Board of Selectmen, but Advisory and Finance Committee, Planning Board, these are all very important committees that also help us shape the budget and help us shape how we want Plymouth to move forward. So it's really vital and wonderful that you're all here this evening. You know, we just finished up a town meeting where we passed a $186 million budget.
In a blink of an eye.
In a blink of an eye. And a $35 million
new project
right, for Town Hall, where the old courthouse is going to be. So, Matt, I'm going to skip over you just for a moment. I will come back to you,
problem.
But I would like to start with John. And just, John, I know that you and the Advisory and Finance Committee really go through that budget very with a fine-tooth comb. Yep. So would you tell, our folks at home the role of the Advisory and Finance Committee, your thoughts on the budget this past year, and sort of where do you see our budget and costs and revenue, et cetera, going?
Okay. Well, the Advisory and Finance Committee really has two roles. One is primarily the finance role, which is looking at the budget, scrutinizing the budget, understanding what's there, and making recommendations to town meeting on whether or not to approve that budget, working with town administration in terms of understanding some of the items in the budget. Our second role is an advisory role, and we're a part of the legislative branch of government, so we really serve the needs of town meeting, the committee of precinct chairs, and that's primarily our advisory role, is to advise them on every article that comes before town meeting. Because even if an article is not actually allocating or appropriating funds, there's some sort of financial under it. And so that's our role with respect to town meeting, is to advise them on whether or not to approve certain articles.
If I may,
yeah,
too.
Sure, absolutely.
You brought up scrutinize. Can you explain to people the process of how you actually scrutinize that budget? Because I think it's fascinating how you do it.
So we receive essentially a detailed budget book. Contains all of the various line items that are included in the budget. Now, I've been doing this for 8 years, and in the 8 years that I've been doing it, we have really, as far as the departmental budgets go, there's really not a lot of fat in the departmental budgets. It's mostly employee expenses, contracted benefits. Every once in a while you run into a line item that's about, a gas appropriation for $500 for the year for, personal car use. But there's not a whole lot other than that in the departmental budgets. The real exposure for us in the budget is in fixed costs and in some of the items that are outside of the departmental budgets.
And you have subcommittees that actually work on each entity throughout the town.
And John, you just do the town side of the budget. Is that correct? Can you explain that split? Because when we say $186 million, there's really quite a difference between what the town is spending versus what the school budget is spending. We
actually do work with the school department in reviewing their budget. the town really has limited ability to, if you will, do a line item veto
Right.
on the school budget. The only real control the town side has over the school budget is the bottom line number. So if town meeting wanted to cut $1 million from the school budget, they could just change that line item by $1 million. I'm not suggesting that they do that, but the challenge is, understanding what the impacts of that $1 million would be. And, cutting $1 million from a budget just arbitrarily and not knowing what the impacts are going to be is, I think, a little foolhardy.
And does your subcommittee actually looks at all the
We do
what's
look at
in
all
that school
yes.
budget though?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do. Yep.
You get to see all those line items.
Yep.
And what's the percentage breakdown between the 100, say our current 186 percentage school versus town?
I haven't done that math in a little while, but it's roughly a 60-40 split. But it's important to recognize that even though it's a 60-40 split,
School side to town.
yeah,
School
school's
is
60,
60,
town is
yeah.
40.
Yeah.
On the town side of the budget, there are considerable costs that are really school costs that are
Right.
being carried on the town side.
Right.
For instance, all of the health insurance is combined for the employees is combined into a single account, and that's managed on the town side.
Right.
That was moved over, I think, in 2004 or 2005 from the school side to the town side. You can see it if you look at the historical budgets, where the school budget was up around $74, $73 million, and then all of a sudden it dropped down to 64.
Yeah, but the town side
The
went
town
up.
side went up. Yep.
I think if you do take that out though, I think it's somewhere around 92, 93 million.
Yep.
Is what
Yep.
the school side is.
Yeah.
If you take out those
Right.
costs of fixed costs.
And that budget is primarily approved by the school committee, which is also an elected board.
That's correct.
Working very closely with Superintendent Maestas.
That's correct.
And so the Board of Selectmen really only have control or input over the town side of it and votes only on the 40%.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to
Okay.
to this discussion on the budget, but I did want to get our third guest in, Mark Garrett, who I think sometimes he gets to work sort of on the fun side, and that is like planning and development, and then the future of what the town will
that
look
what I'm
like.
having? Fun?
Yes, yes. And how do we
I
attract?
think,
with it.
I think we're making it look too easy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But Mark, the planning board also is an elected position. Advisory and finance, they're appointed by the town moderator, who's currently Steve Trifletti, who's elected. But the planning board is also an elected
We are
committee.
elected. We have 5 elected members, and we self-appoint an alternate for certain procedures where we need to ensure a supermajority. What the planning board really does is its major function is as the steward of the zoning bylaw. We caretake it. Doesn't mean that everything in it is what we say, but we kind of organize and manage the zoning bylaw. Any zoning bylaw amendment that comes to town meeting comes through the planning board. Planning staff, Lee Hartman, Robin Carver, do a lot of work in working with petitioned zoning articles to nuance them, because obviously people who are writing the language don't deal in warrant articles, so they kind of help them prepare the proposal in the appropriate way. Then the zoning article comes before the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, and also FinCom before it goes forth to town meeting. Sometimes the planning board writes its own amendment to the bylaw, where based on our experience we see technical flaws in the bylaw, so we try to correct them or at least bridge them for the time being. The second thing we do is we do have limited special permit power, so we do issue certain permits on specifically rural density developments, recreation developments, village open space developments, which are we do that because we also do subdivision control regulating. So they're kind of hand in hand. So that's why we have those special permit responsibilities, and that is where we need a potential alternate because you need the supermajority for special permits. Other than that, when we have cases on a weekly basis, we are mostly functioning, and I would say it's probably an 85 to 90 split, 15 to 10 being special permits, and the rest, the larger fractions, 90 and 85, being recommendations to the ZBA, who is the other entity in town that has special permit responsibility, which is an appointed board through the Board of Selectmen. So that's what we do. We shepherd the master plan. We deal with a lot of the plans that come forth, the village center master plans, open space plans. We oversee various planning documents that come through the town, on a case-by-case basis. And the other hat that I wear is as actually co-chair of the Industrial Lands Committee that was formulated by the Board of Selectmen. Matt currently sits as my co-chair. Bill Hallisey functioned in that role when he was chairman of the Board of Selectmen. And what we did in that instance is we spent about 2 years. We prepared a report that was presented to town meeting in 2012, in which we looked at the master plan and the things that the master plan wanted to say about non-residential development in the community. And we worked to try to put together strategies to make it easier or more effective for non-residential commercial development in this town. 78% of the town is zoned residential.
Yep.
And the remaining 22% is scattered amongst the various commercial and industrial and transitional and neighborhood zones, all of which add up to very small fractions and all of which have their own unique goals and objectives for development. A general commercial district is not an arterial commercial district, and the requirements are different. Some of them dovetail, but for the most part, they're distinctly different zones. So we worked through the process of looking at the zoning bylaw in its entirety. We spoke to the business community because there has been this constant undercurrent that we need to increase the commercial, non-residential development in the community to offset property tax burdens due to a $186 million budget.
Yeah, and just to briefly say, like in Plymouth, 80% of the property tax burden does fall on the resident, 20% on the business. And we've had many discussions, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, Planning Board, about becoming more business friendly to attract businesses into the rest of that 22% that is available. I think a while ago, Matt, we had asked, I believe it was the finance director, to look at what it would mean to take that 80-20 split down to a 70-30 split. And the numbers were staggering, I have to say. You think it's easy, it sounds easy, but it was $1 billion of new business that we would have to attract to this community to reduce the tax burden to a 70-30 split, which would only mean a $2 reduction. I shouldn't say only, because a $2 reduction on the average home is $600 a year reduction in the taxes for residents. On the planning board, do you think that's doable, or how much do you think we can attract over the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years?
We have to change our ways in Plymouth to do that. We cannot live in the model that we've lived with in the past 20 or 30 years of doing that. We don't have enough space to do it. Part of the charge of the Industrial Lands Committee was to look at ways to increase the percentage of land that could be increased for commercial development. And in
That
these
is-
introductory comments, I won't go into that, but
Yeah.
as we
Well, I
discuss
think
it, I
we've kind
will.
of jumped into discussion.
But what we also did was we looked at utilizing the existing inventory that we have of non-residential land and making that as efficient as we possibly can, or let me rephrase that, make recommendations in that report to make that as
Right.
efficient as we can. But even doing that, even making the existing inventory completely efficient, we still are going to be woefully behind and not achieve this great change in the tax
Right.
burden to the residential sector. There has to be other things.
Such
There
as?
has to be, well,
such
expansion
as?
of non-residential zone land, and the whole complexity of things that go in that. But that's what has to happen.
And right now, is the planning board looking at all the zoning bylaws? Did you hire, was it a consultant you hired, and?
Yes, one of the
Is that gonna
things. So
help with that?
one of the things we're doing is, and this has been a cry for 20 years, long before I was on the planning board. When I was back on the ZBA, when Lee's first go around in planning and stuff, we've been talking about really doing a wholesale. I don't want to say revision, because that's not what we're doing, but an updating of the zoning bylaw. Largely, the zoning bylaw is a 1973 document. And
It's time for a change.
It's been tweaked many times, maybe more times than it should have been, for the convenience of the moment.
Yep.
The problem that you have is every time you tweak that, unless you're really careful about back reading, you create language that takes and makes other parts of the bylaw ineffective or contradictory. We had a classic case that it was a debate in this town about 2 or 3 years ago about an auto dealership at Exit 5.
Yep.
And it had to do with the language of the town meeting vote versus what was translated in the actual bylaw. They were inconsistent. The intent was, we were able to resolve that, but it was a heated, debate, a struggle at times. Fortunately, it worked out. Everybody came together, and it did work out in the final analysis. But those kind of things occur when you're tweaking pieces. When you tweaking section 250 point ... whatever it is, you may be affecting 240 ... and you don't realize it.
So you're saying that this consultant then that you've brought in, working with the planning board, is going to completely overhaul, have like a new
It's going to update. And basically
so it's not
the
going to
process.
be tweaks? Is it going to be tweaks or just
No,
an
it's not
update?
going to be. It's going to be modernized. But when I say modernized, you have to realize that we're a town of 400 years old,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of things. We can't go around creating nonconformities all over the place
Right.
either. So it's really a complex balance. And I should say that we have a consultant working with town council, working with the planning board.
Yeah.
So it's really a troika working on that. It's not just a consultant
Yeah.
rewriting our bylaw and then we say yay or nay. There is an iterative process, and the consultant is actually working very closely with Copeland and Page on this.
Mark, how true, if I may,
Go ahead.
how true is it, we hear this as Selectmen a lot, although we don't hear it as much lately, I don't think, but that the town of Plymouth is not very, very business friendly. How true is that? And if it is true, how can we
Define
all change that?
define the town of Plymouth. That's no, and I
process.
The
I put-
process.
Well, the process is the process. I mean, understand, Plymouth is largely a town that has not been built out, and when you have a non-built out, underdeveloped town. When I say underdeveloped, when you go to Brockton is built out border to border. It's got a couple parks in it, but largely you enter one side, it's developed, and you leave the other side, and it's still developed.
And I would say that I don't think anyone in Plymouth wants.
Well, I'm not suggesting
know,
that.
but I
but
don't
what I'm
want
saying is,
people to think that
to
that's
answer
what we're
Matt's
saying.
question, when you have undeveloped land, okay, you bring in a whole host of issues that Brockton really doesn't have to deal with. Brockton does not deal, I don't know specifically, but towns like Brockton, I should say, don't have a whole lot of issues with endangered species or aquifers, or they have other issues, but in terms of land use, so Plymouth's business unfriendly, I don't think that's the case. I think Plymouth is a complicated town, and I think that it has different kind of issues that tend to be a little bit more difficult for developers to deal with. And because of that, we get this label. I think where Plymouth is somewhat business unfriendly is we want business, and this is just not Plymouth, it's everywhere. We want business until business is in our backyard, until business is really close to us. We want business over there. You know, we want the benefit of tax base over there, but I still want to look out at my woods. So by virtue of that, we create complications.
But wouldn't you say, it's interesting that you say that we're, you know, a 400-year-old town, because you know, we have that whole historic nature, and and Plymouth to me looks different everywhere you go. I mean, when you're in the downtown area, it's very historic and picturesque, and the waterfront area and whatever. You go to the beaches, and it's, you know, beautiful, and natural resources and the trails and things. But then, you know, you go to some sections, and it, you know, to me it looks like Florida, because it's just, you know, one strip mall, you know, like after another. I'm thinking of Long Pond Road. I'm not being critical by any sense. It's just that it has that kind of different look and feel in every part of it. And we're fortunate in that Plymouth is 104 square miles. We're huge. And that we can kind of have this far-flung feel to us, where you can kind of keep the historic and you know, the natural resources and the beauty of being a coastal town. And I grew up here, so I remember Plymouth in the 60s and 70s, and you know, to me, you know, West Plymouth, you know, was like Carver Road, and there was maybe like, you know, a dozen houses going out that. Or Black Cat Road was probably where you. I'm sorry, but Black Cat Road is probably, you know, like.
What's your address?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that.
Everybody knows where I live.
You know, it was
when you
kind
have sled dogs, you can't hide.
It was kind of like, you know, the border of civilization.
They were dirt roads. They were dirt roads.
Yep.
South Meadow Road to the airport was a dirt road that was used for drag racing because nobody went out there.
Well, going down Long Pond Road and just to get to like Oren Line Road or something, that was the back of beyond. You know,
Absolutely.
so Plymouth has experienced tremendous growth, but it really has worked very hard to keep that sort of picturesque small town feel. And I think that's where there's a lot of chafing that goes on.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's the point of, and I'm not value judging one or the other. I mean, that's where the battle line is. Where do you draw the line between development and infrastructure and dirt roads and rural residential development? How do you do that? And part of the problem that Plymouth has is we're trying to do it all. And in a time when all is really hard to achieve. One of the things that in my profession as an environmental consultant and a land use planner, when I first started 30 years ago, we called undeveloped land marginal land. I tell this story a lot. Because back then in the 70s, when land wasn't developed, there was a reason for it. In 2014, if there's land that's not developed and there's not a building on it, there's largely a reason for it. Because, and that reason is some complexity, physical, environmental, legal, financial, and maybe just, I own the land and I don't want to do anything.
Like the 1,000 acres.
Well, the 1,000 acres is a great example
let's
of
talk
land
about that.
with complexities.
We do have a phone call, but let's definitely touch on the 1,000 acres, because I think people hear that and it's a concept, and you know, beyond a location. So I'd really like to get into that. But we do have a caller.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Oh.
I'd like to ask Mr. Garrett why he thinks we lost Cisco, why we didn't get Cisco and Cisco went to Clinton.
With Cisco.
Why we lost
Cisco went to Plimpton.
Well, I don't know the total ins and outs of what happened in that, but I do know the basics. The town of Plimpton had a company. At the time, it was Akarsha Graphics. Now it's, I think, Light Controls. It's the building right on Spring Street. And behind that building, they knew that Route 44 was coming. And they knew that they fought hard for an interchange at Spring Street. They zoned that area into an industrial park some time ago. I don't know what the date was.
You're talking about Plimpton, did
This is Plimpton, yes.
But they're saying that they had it all set.
That's exactly right. They sat and they had it all set, and they were it wasn't Cisco, they were waiting for a taker, whoever that taker was.
How long was it set for?
I think it was probably 15, 20 years. It's something like that. But they were waiting for the inevitability of the new Route 44 and the interchange. And they argued for that interchange. And the interchange is at Spring Street and not at the Route 80 crossing for just that reason. They fought for that, and they got all the infrastructure in place, and then Cisco jumped on it before anybody else, and you can see what they have. They have clearly, and I mean, Plimpton's a lot smaller.
Why wouldn't they even think of Plymouth?
We didn't have the area for them. Where were we going to put them?
Yeah.
They want companies want build.
1,000 acres we could put it on.
Yeah, but it's not ready.
Wait, listen to me. We don't have build-ready sites. Developers today want build-ready sites. They don't want to come in and negotiate with a town meeting. They don't want to negotiate with changing zoning. They want to come in and say, we have X amount of square feet we need to build. We need this amount of acreage. We want to be able to we want you to say yes to this agreement. We will buy up your land, whatever the land is, as you're marketing it, and we will stick our shovel in. Is that okay? And Plimpton said yes, and that was it. We in Plymouth.
Shouldn't we go down that road?
Pardon?
Economic development was starting to look at that, right?
Well, they've been looking at it, and we've been looking at it. The point is, if we're going to go down that road, we have to do something. We have to make the kind of zoning changes. We have to make the kind of investments in land to be build ready, shovel ready. They don't want to come in and cut a deal contingent on meeting a lot of things to get a site build ready. They want the build ready site.
Right, which goes back to Matt's point about Plymouth being not very business friendly.
Well, it's not a question of not being business friendly. We have an industrial park in North Plymouth, which we did that for many years ago. We have private land, Camelot Park being one, an industrial park, where they prepared a site. They had a site ready to go.
But those are all built out.
But these are now built out.
Right.
And we have to go and say, okay, now where's the next site? Where's that next place?
And I think personally it's the 1,000 acres.
Yeah, thank you, caller.
I think we need to start looking at that 1,000 acres, and we've discussed it on the board, and I think a majority of us are on that same page that, it's 1,000 acres, but really the buildable acres are probably more, I don't know, 300-400 acres. But we've got to start working on those titles. And people say, this could take, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But if we don't start doing it, we'll never get to that point. But let me just finish. What you just said about Plimpton and Cisco, they sat on that for 15 years.
Yeah.
So we're sitting on a gold mine here, but we haven't done anything with it. So if we can start doing something with it, and then
let's come back to the industrial lands report. One of the things we did in that report was we created a matrix. We listened to the development community. We also brought in open space people. We sat down and we created, I know Lee hates this term, but it's the only thing you can call it. It's a matrix. It's a rating system. And what it does is it takes all the criteria. It takes existing infrastructure, proximity to residences, proximity to highway interchanges, visibility from major roadways, environmental issues, liability issues, legal, tax, and whatever. And it creates a weighted score that you can look, I forget, I think the total score, if a site is perfect, we'd get 140, okay, based on the rating system. you rate a site, and it's whether the town uses it or a private citizen uses it, okay, if they do the work honestly, whoever does the work honestly, you're going to get a score. Now, obviously, if the maximum is 140 and you score 120, that means the site is probably pretty reasonable to be developed.
Yep.
If you score a 30, that means you got a lot of work in front of you before you go shovel ready. So from the town's perspective, the town could use this matrix, and the Industrial Lands Committee did do this in a just to see if it worked, to test it against the criteria. And we found that there were some sites that you would have thought were great sites, and they weren't as good as you thought. There were some sites that you would have thought were not so good.
Yeah.
And they scored higher. And there is always the last fatal flaw. If the town doesn't own the land, it's the decision and the discretion of the property owner. I will tell you that we had a site. We spoke to the property owner early on. They were kind of interested. They scored fairly high. They weren't so interested anymore. So again, I don't know what the reasons are. I'm not critiquing whether the reasons are good or bad, but ultimately, most of the land is private property.
Yep.
And unless the property owner is willing to make the change, even if the town goes in and makes the change, the underlying zoning still exists for 5 years. There's a grandfathering, so they could do what they could always have done. So the upzoning has to be kind of a mutual agreement between the municipality, who's looking for the economic development concept, and the private landowner who's looking to make a buck on a piece of property. The Constitution allows us to extract reasonable economic gain from property, real property or intellectual. Okay.
Is the 1,000 acres, Mark, is that the only large property that you can think of in Plymouth?
No, it's the largest, but there are several large parcels, and
that the town owns.
No, they're privately owned.
Yeah.
The town doesn't yet own the 1,000 acres
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know who owns it.
Right.
And the 1,000 acres, not only the tax title issues, but somebody is going to have to get the state to commit to give them access to Route 495.
Change.
Because whether it's 1,000 acres or 400 acres or 200 acres, whatever ultimately is usable, if they don't have direct access to the highway, they're not. And we deal with the airport, which is a really neat spot. There isn't a developer who's really interested in it unless it's a niche use that needs it. Because they don't want to get off the
flight, right?
That's it. But they don't want to get off the highway at exit 6 and then drive 10 to 15 minutes through the country to get that. That's not proximal.
So one of the other findings out of the industrial lands report was the capacity to change height limits in some of our property that's already zoned.
Well, that's the second part of it. We talked about expansion of our non-residential zone land. We also spoke of how do we make our existing inventory more efficient. One of the things that came out of that report was to increase heights. And we brought an article, the planning board brought an article to town meeting, which was narrowly defeated. Zoning articles need two-thirds, so it's not simple majority. And I forget, I think we missed it by 3 or 4 votes, something like that, for the two-thirds.
And the height was, if I remember correctly, it wasn't that.
It was 75 feet. And it was
Yeah.
only in specific areas in the industrial park, which to me was far away from the character that they wanted to preserve.
Yeah.
And I understand that being, change is hard, and I've seen a lot of change, in all the years that I've lived here, and Plymouth has changed significantly. But I did think that on that particular article, we did try to reach out and sort of, placate and meet everyone's particular needs, because we do have this interesting, almost three-pronged approach. We have development, we have open space, which is also huge here, and we have preserving Plymouth as it was. And these are three real groups that we have to deal with here in the town as far as moving anything forward. And they're all represented quite well at town meeting and very passionate about these issues. But that particular one, I thought really it wasn't going to impact anyone who wanted to preserve, wasn't going to impact open space, but it was seriously going to help development.
We chose to bring that one forth because while we didn't think it was a slam dunk, we knew that there would be some discussion. We thought it would be a relatively easy article to get through.
Yeah.
And it was defeated. Now,
Won on a majority vote, but not on the two-thirds vote.
On the two-thirds vote, it was defeated. Well, a loss is a loss.
A loss is a loss. Yeah, right. What is it?
I will tell you, I am aware that there are citizens that are considering putting a petitioned article together, whether it's for fall or spring, to bring that article back for a re-vote.
Which is the beauty of our town government.
So that's still out there. Other things that were happening in terms of making our existing development more efficient was and things that have been accomplished. That the 75-foot was not the only thing. I mean, the report spoke to redoing and revising the zoning bylaw. Spoke which we're doing. Spoke to the reduction of sewer tie-in fees, which has been done.
Yeah, and JB just reported last night that we have 48. Since doing that, we've had 48 new tie-ins. Is that, am I correct, Matt?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it is working. Because it is important to get that our sewer up to
you can have
capacity.
on
And the other thing that's happening, I think, partially because of the 400th, is we got to update some infrastructure. And that's the other thing that the town has to do. We can't sit back and think that a developer is going to come in and build our highways, build our gas lines. They may help us, but it's our responsibility. If we want to be business friendly, we have to provide an environment that is friendly to business. And part of that is hard pipe, utilities, pavement.
How true do you think it is with now the courthouse moving forward that the town's going to be developing that area? How true do you think it is that there may be outside developers now going to want to come in and start doing development in the downtown area and the waterfront? Do you think there'll be more developers out there that'll be ready because the town's now investing in it?
Well, I think that it's a valuable investment to increase the attractiveness.
Okay.
There's another. Do you want to take the call?
Yeah. Why don't we take the call and caller?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello,
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Cisco's, they were on 133 acres, so just to let you know that. But that's not why I called. What's going on with Cranberry Crescent at Commerce Way and Route 80? Land's been vacant there since last year.
Good question.
And they were talking about 47 acres off Long Pond Road to develop that and turn it into a rent-room village. I'm saying, oh my God, I thought the American consumer was tapped out, that the middle class is shrinking. Here's looking to put a shopping center in off Long Pond Road, which is already congested. Hopefully that thing is dead.
Well, it's not though. It's coming back now, and it's Paragon Outlets, and they're gonna be. I think they're downsizing the project a little bit. It's going to be behind Home Depot, and they're going to be making some changes to the interchange as well. So no, that project is alive and well actually. But it's a good question on the Crescent. Yeah.
On the Paragon properties, they are, I believe, filing. We just saw their notice of project change to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts MEPA unit. That was circulated this week, and I believe they are filing with the town for whatever modification to the special permit or a new permit. I'm not quite sure what the status of that is. I heard that they are filing next week, so that would be coming up within the next few weeks in terms of public discussions and public hearings. Cranberry Crossing, you say it's been vacant for a year? It's been vacant for about 15 years. That site,
It's that 15-year mark again.
that site is, I don't know what Cranberry Crossing is going to do. There was a lot of talk of specific users being ready to go. Hasn't happened. You know, there was a lot of bluster last summer. They did a lot of cutting that they shouldn't have. They did a lot of regrading that was not part of the original
And that
permit.
kind of slowed it down after.
Yeah.
The town went after them to try to correct that. There was a lot of activity to correct it, and as soon as the ZBA approved the special permit conditions or the actions to comply with the special permit conditions, they've been hibernating. Can't tell you. Again, this is one of those things where the town wants economic development, but you're at the mercy of the private developer. I don't know what he's doing.
Do you think if the town had...
I have my suspicions.
Do you think, Mark, if we go back to when Dennis Hanks left, we've lost a lot of economic development, I think, opportunities personally. Do you think if by getting an economic development person back, you can foresee that person working with, somebody like this group to try to get it back on track?
Well, I think right now we don't have that person,
Yeah.
and so you're right. We have lost that inertia, if you will, that keeps working with existing applicants or people who are really interested, and
Help them
we
walk
also
through the process.
and
It
we've
also goes out and looks
yeah.
for businesses
for new
that
people
would
to
be
come in.
right.
Exactly. So yeah, without that person, you are kind of fumbling because it's kind of by committee and not really active.
We just met with the. I'm fortunate to be on the foundation, Economic Foundation. We met the other night, and we're still trying to work out with the foundation of either hiring somebody doing a consultant basis, working with them. The town, as you know, John, they actually approved $125,000 for an economic foundation, an economic director for the town. So I think I think that's key for us. But
Yep.
one thing I heard at the meeting the other night is right after Dennis left, and I think he left in October, we were still getting some calls. But after that, after the first of the year, it just dried up.
Dead.
There's nobody calling.
Yep.
I hear dial tones still. I think our caller's
Caller,
still with
are
us.
you still with us?
I'm still there because I just
Thank
want
you
to make one more comment.
Absolutely.
I know the property at Commerce Way up there has been vacant. I remember I've owned property in Plymouth for over 30 years. And Vogel used to own that land, I think. So I'm talking about last year it was cleared.
Right.
Recently it was cleared.
Right.
And I don't want to see the 47 acres behind Home Depot if you're going to let a developer come in there without major road improvements, because you got a traffic problem through there as it is.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's all I got to say.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank
you.
you so much for calling. Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about the planning, which is so key, because it is really, where is Plymouth going in the future? What kind? And like I said, we do sort of have that delicate balance between development, open space, and preserving the character and the old. But just briefly on open space, Matt, if you could talk about, we went to the Plimco Dam restoration project celebration that they had. And that was truly amazing, the work that they're doing with that, and sort of opening up Plymouth, I think, to open space, to reverting back to natural resources and things. And of course, the herring run and the plantations kicked off a herring festival, which again, hopefully will get bigger and bigger. And again, another way to draw people into Plymouth, because we are a destination spot too. We are a tourist town. And, long-term Plymouthians like myself, we're like, oh yeah, we're a tourist town. We forget that. But that was truly amazing to be there.
It was,
and to see that
it really
natural
was.
resources open up.
And to hear the history of what it was, what it used to be like, how it stopped, and how it's starting to flow again. But there was a lot of people there. It was amazing to be there and see, what has happened there and what's going to continue to happen.
Right, as they take down the next dam.
And as you said, I remember Dennis Hanks, again, talking a long time ago, we need to continue to create reasons for people to come to
here.
Plymouth.
Yep.
And that's just another reason to bring people
Yeah.
here. The beauty of that, and then the walking trails that you can have with this, and it's just, and we walked some of that.
Yeah,
It's
we did.
beautiful.
We walked
As
up.
you
It
do
goes from a
that-
pond to a stream,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
on the bottom of this pond that my entire life had been a pond here in Plymouth.
And you could just sit there and just hear it just flowing. It was
Yep.
just, it was.
And as you do that, you make Plymouth more attractive to businesses.
Yes, right.
Because businesses want an attractive setting
Yep.
for their operation, for their employees, who, you know, to some extent, some of them are actually going to move to Plymouth.
Yes, which is also a good thing.
You know, all of that helps make Plymouth more attractive as a, if you will, a commercial site.
Yeah, well, I've had the opportunity to talk a little bit with David Gould and also with Evelyn Strawn, who is the head of the Open Space, Friends of Open Space Network. And they're a great group that pulled together. And talking about really pushing Plymouth in the ecotourism area. You know, Plymouth is great to bring them here for the history and the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, but also to expand kind of into an ecotourism, because we do have the beaches, we do have amazing trails, we do have, you know, bike trails would be another thing. But again, it's just another way to really take advantage of Plymouth's open space, not only in the development, how do we want to develop that, but how do we balance that with our natural resources as well.
So that's interesting, but I guess, you know, if we're going to launch off on an effort to head down that direction.
Long-term plan, John. Yeah.
I understand,
Yeah.
long-term plan. There needs to be an understanding of whether or not that's a viable way for Plymouth to pay for its existence. And, you know, I don't know, you know, how big a pocket that is, how valuable it can potentially be in terms of a revenue stream. But Plymouth is in dire need of, I think, more revenue than it has today.
Yes, and let's talk a little bit about that, because Mark, did you want to just say something, and then we'll definitely get back to that, John.
I just want to, you know, on this, the whole idea of trails and ecotourism. Back, I'm going to say it's more than a year, probably a year and a half or so, in a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, I think School Committee, FinCom might have been there, Building Committee, I don't know, it was quite a large group. We voted to adopt healthy communities. And not a spin-off of that, but a person who has been working diligently is Malcolm McGregor. He is working on developing a trail network that interconnects Plymouth with itself and with its surroundings. And to that end, in a lot of our discussions with applicants who come before us, Malcolm is always looking to get that interconnectivity, especially on larger parcels, a 100-acre parcel. It would be nice to have an access trail. Mark Ritter, Waverly Oaks, in his new residential development, has agreed to interconnect the town-owned land to the south of Waverly Oaks with Forges Field by allowing a trail that's not a part of the golf course. It's not a cart path, but it's a trail that people can walk on that will be safer than, you know, than having, you know, errant tee shots coming at them. So there are efforts out there, and I think one of the important things that we as officials, appointed, elected, and our citizens have to realize is that it's a different model today. And we have to be looking at other things. And there is a reason why ecotourism may work. Look at the whale watch boats. Whale watch boats are ecotourism.
Yes, they are.
You watch them in the middle of the summer. My wife works at the information center. People are coming in. Where's the boat? Where's the whale watchers? Where, you know, they want to know where. So it's already here. You can already start developing the numbers, and then look at what hikers. We have road races every 10 minutes. We have bike races every 15 minutes.
Destination for that now.
We have to start thinking about that infrastructure, because we can't put runners, bikers, and a lot of cars on Long Pond Road.
On Long Pond Road,
we just can't do it.
No, you're right.
You can do it. You just can't do it.
Thank you, John. Yes, we are doing it. You're right. You can do it.
But you know, I can't believe again the hours just flying by. But But let's talk about why we're talking about all these things like economic development, planning, new ways to bring revenue to town, because back to John's point, we need new revenue. John, why do we need new revenue here in Plymouth?
You know, one of the biggest challenges, I think, for Plymouth is our size. You talked about we're 104 square miles earlier. Well, we're 104 square miles and we're spread all over that 104 square miles. That means we need police officers all over that 104 square miles. Not all over it, but we need police officers to cover it. We need firefighters to cover that 104 square miles. And we need Department of Public Works to service that 104 square miles and the 400 miles of roads that exist there. And we don't really have the resources, the financial resources, to, in my opinion, properly size our police department.
Or properly take care of our roads.
Or properly take care of our roads.
That's a
for
big
sure.
issue.
Anybody who drives a car knows our
Yeah.
roads aren't well taken care of.
And-
I mean,
and that's
they're
something
taken
that-
care of as well as they can
Yeah.
be with the resources that are available.
Well, the interesting
Okay.
thing, John says we need revenue to service our 104 square miles. Plymouth has always been largely 104 square miles. The problem is there were a whole lot less people in
Yeah.
that
Yes.
104 square
Right, yeah,
miles
that's the issue.
25, 30 years
Now we're
ago.
talking
Yeah.
60,000 people.
Now we have 60,000 people
Right.
spread out.
We've tripled in size since
Absolutely.
1970.
And there's a basic fact here that we cannot escape. We can argue about budgets. We can size of budgets, what we're spending on this or that. Life costs money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a basic fact. I mean, it would not be nice to say that taxes could go down. Taxes haven't gone down really ever. We can slow the rate they increase,
Yes.
but
Right,
we can't.
right.
You're not going to create
Right.
tax cuts without
Yeah, right.
without largely changing the way things are done. And I don't think humans don't like change.
Yeah, but you
Right,
know, but
yeah.
we are.
Neither do municipalities.
Yeah, but we are.
More
But
so.
municipalities are humans.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the human factor.
So, but we are hitting upon, I think, some real pressures that are coming onto our budget that are
Absolutely.
really starting to affect people. I mean, the town manager this past year in the budget process says that to expect taxes to rise on average $150 to $300 on the average home. And the average salary in Plymouth is $49,000.
So that average home is owned by that individual with a household income of $49,000.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
one. I
Roughly
wouldn't say
speaking.
it's a household income. I would
Yep.
say it was, individual income.
Yeah, I think it's the household income, actually.
It is?
Yeah.
You do? Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I believe so.
Well, that's, okay, I thought it was individual, but that.
I think that's what the state's data reports tell us.
But when you think about that, $49,000, that's not a lot of money.
No.
And fortunately, it's Plymouth and not Boston or nothing closer, because you made an interesting statement on Facebook on a discussion you were having that I was following about how we're not the highest tax. And we're not the lowest. We're kind of smack dab in the middle. And I know a lot of people, I just kind of want to put this up. This was a great article in the business section of the Old Colony Memorial. Where's my, they're over there.
Over there.
I know. And it said that that the average property taxes on rise across the state, average single family tax bill percentage change from FY11 to FY14, and Plymouth kind of falls into the 12.5% and 17.5%. That's huge, and I certainly know that people's salaries have not gone up 12.5% to 17.5% in the past 3 years. So, it's like it's taking a bigger and bigger bite. And I feel as a community and as elected leaders, we have a responsibility towards that, to spend the people's money wisely, to prioritize, to think long range, to come up with the ways that it may not solve it tomorrow, but we're on a path to at least halt the increase, $150 to $300, reduce the rise, or obviously we don't have time to talk about everything because we talk about this for hours,
Yep.
off camera, all of us together. But I feel like we have a responsibility to meet that and to work towards reducing that burden. Because I personally think 12.5% to 17.5% in 3 years is a lot, and the places that are higher are like around the Boston area, which you would kind of expect.
So the South Shore is the last place in eastern Massachusetts where there is developable land.
Yes,
Developable land.
yes.
yeah.
And it
Okay.
is definitely a real
Plymouth.
And
growth
as,
spot.
as
right.
that area around Boston packs out,
Yep.
that business is going to be moving down here. I don't know when it'll be, 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
But I'd like to be ready for
here's-
it, John.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely. You know,
It's-
the biggest problem for us, it goes back to the 104 square mile thing,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Most communities in Massachusetts are 20 square miles,
Yep.
30 square miles, 40 square miles. That's a big town, okay? And their police forces, their fire forces, their Department of Public Works are focused on that area.
Yep.
Okay? They can have half the police force that we have to cover their 40 square miles.
Yep.
And so, but they may have more population. They may have higher assessed valuation than we do.
Yep.
Okay? So they're actually able to pay those firefighters, pay those police officers more money than we're able to. So we have this problem that, you know, we have to not only increase our commercial real estate footprint, you know, the revenue that's generated by commercial real estate, but also our residential footprint as well at the same time. And somehow we need to do that 80-20 to 70-30 kind of split
Yeah.
as we're doing that. And that requires us to think really long term and plan how we're
Yeah.
going to do that. How do we attract business so that it offsets the new residential that we bring in?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it becomes a process of planned growth.
Yes.
Growth is coming.
Yep.
Growth is
Again,
coming.
we don't know when.
Yeah.
But we have to be ready for it.
Right.
And a lot of what we have done in the past has been reactive growth.
Right.
And reactive growth never benefits the
Right.
municipality. And I'm pushing this point very strongly. Plymouth has a brand. We don't have to succumb to every national brand
Yep.
because Plymouth has a national brand. We are Plymouth. We are having a 400th celebration. We are somebody. When you say Plymouth, people in the hinterlands of Iowa and Nebraska have a picture.
Yes, we're fortunate
Have a
in that
picture
way.
of what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
What
Absolutely.
Plymouth is.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And that's why it's good all our boards now, I think, are looking further ahead with long-range planning
Right.
and not reacting, which is
Right.
great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm getting a signal here, and I don't know what it means.
I think we're
but
running out of time.
We're running out of time. Oh no. Yes, and to that point, Matt, I would say that I think that the boards in Plymouth are working together very well, or much better, to address these issues and talk about these issues and bring them up and not be afraid to do that and to really think long term, which is what we need to do to move Plymouth forward. We're a very
Right.
dynamic community,
right.
and we want to do that. Well, okay, I'm seeing
Out of
that
time,
we're out
yeah.
of time. I can't believe it. Thank you.
sponsors?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Gee, have you done this before? I want to thank some great underwriters, Jeff Cohen and One Stop Painting, great company, great service, Brewster PC Solutions with Wrestling Brewster, watch wrestling with computers right here on PAC TV, attorneys Trifiletti and Costa on Long Pond Road, and another wonderful underwriter, David and Kevin Gallerani, owners of Cape Auto Body and Service. Locations are Samoset and Sandwich Streets right here in Plymouth. And I want to thank my guests for attending, Mark, John, Matt, thank you so much. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in, even though your favorite Karen was not here tonight. And Karen, we'll see you in 7. Am I good? Thank you so much for tuning in.